Well, absolutely. I mean, when I got divorced from my first marriage, I was disabled, and that was my first thought was who's going to accept me for who I am. And I need a little extra help around the house sometimes, like opening jars, which I think a lot of women do.
Even
But
I, even I
some
do.
don't.
Let's
Yeah.
be honest. I mean,
but
and
but
the jar
I
won't open sometimes. Like,
I
just
know.
doesn't want to open.
I know. I swear they do that. And then he comes and it's like real easy. And I say, well, I loosened it for you.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
but it is a tricky thing to do. But that was my first thought. And my encouragement to those people wondering that is I eventually had to just tell myself, you know what? There is not one perfect person out there on this planet right now. And we all have our things. And
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. Recently, Spotify released a new feature which allows people to now rate their favorite shows similarly to how the Apple Podcast app allows it. If you think the show deserves it, I'd love it if you left us a 5-star review. This will help the show rank better on search engines and help newly diagnosed stroke survivors to find the show, and it could make a massive difference in their recovery. So go to your favorite podcast app and share what the podcast means for you. It really will make a huge difference. Now, this is episode 181, and my guest today is Heather Rendulic. Now, this is episode 181, and my guest today is Heather Rendulic, who, like many of us stroke survivors, experienced the vast range of emotional lows and highs and had to overcome many challenges when at the age of 22, a previously undiagnosed cavernous angioma bled 5 times within an 11-month period. Heather has written a book about her experience called Through Life, Love, and Brain Surgery. Hope you enjoy this episode. Heather Rendulic, welcome to the podcast.
oh, thank you for having me, Bill.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. You're quite the achiever when it comes to hemorrhagic strokes. You've had a few. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what happened to you.
Great. So yeah, I was in my early 20s and I was a healthy person, never had any problems, randomly had a brain hemorrhage. They then diagnosed me with a rare brain condition called cavernous angioma, which in layman's term is just basically a cluster of really weak blood vessels. And I had one on top of my brain stem, and the only known cure is brain surgery, and right now they're researching treatments, but at the time of my diagnosis there were no treatments other than avoid blood thinners and live your life. So I was told mine was inoperable, it was too deep in my brain, they wouldn't touch it. So I was a full-time college student, and over the next year it bled 5 times over 11 months. So I had 5 hemorrhagic strokes. The fifth and final one was a massive one, and actually paralyzed half of my body, my left side of my body. And at that point, my neurosurgeon said, we have to get this thing out of you or else it's going to kill you. So I had a 9-hour craniotomy and they successfully removed the lesion. And I am here talking to you, and it'll be 10 years in December that this all happened.
We got a few things in common. My bleed was 3 times. It was an AVM. It wasn't a cavinoma. First time it bled was in February 2012. So I'm coming into my 10 years today, this week, or something like that. And then my surgeon said the same thing. After 3 bleeds, they said, well, we've had enough. It's time to get this thing out. And it was really deep in the cerebellum, near the cerebellum, not actually in the cerebellum. And the initial people who consulted with thought it was a little bit too dangerous to get to, and they wanted to leave it alone. They didn't want to touch it. But this particular neurosurgeon said, we need to go there and get it out. So that's what they did. What was it like going through each bleed? Did you have the thought in your mind, oh my God, what if I have another one? What if I have another one? Did that enter your mind? For
Oh,
me, it
yes,
actually
absolutely.
didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was terrifying to say the least. I also had a ton of false alarms, like where, sure, every headache or weird feeling you get, you're going to the emergency room thinking it's bleeding again, just to find out, oh no, it's just all in your head and we'll send you home. And then you start feeling crazy because I was a frequent in the emergency room, and they kept sending me home telling me it was nothing. But the ones I had, the 4 out of the 5 were very mild symptoms, like, and I recovered rather quickly. I had some vision changes, or I did have some like tingling on my left side, or just some weakness. But that 5th and final, and I did actually try after the second bleed. I met with a neurosurgeon in Chicago who specialized in angiomas, and he recommended I get gamma knife surgery, which I did have. However, it was not successful, unfortunately. But it was a controversial treatment. But at that point, I was willing to try anything. So, and then it did bleed, 3 more times after that. But it's gone, which I'm happy about. But it was just a crazy time, to feel like your body is betraying you, your body is failing, your body is letting you down. Like I mentioned before, I was a healthy person. I never had any problems. I used to compete in horseback riding, and I was a runner and just really healthy and living a really good life. And this kind of turned it all upside down. It completely changed the trajectory of my life as well. But it was really hard to go through that.
Let's have a philosophical discussion. You were 22, so you were really young, and I totally get that. Do you think that the idea that your body was letting you down was just something that comes from ignorance? Because realistically, there isn't such a thing as your body letting you down, because your body's just doing what your body does. And we don't really have a say in what it does, except if we're living a lifestyle that's contributing to its deterioration and its early deterioration, for example. So did you find a way to sort of deal with that idea that your body was letting you down? Because uh, it's quite a statement, and it feels like it takes you out of control of your environment and what you can um, uh, and and how you can change the trajectory of your recovery from a mindset perspective. Does that make sense? And just tell me your thoughts on what I just said.
Yes. So mindset is everything. I talk about it in my book. I talk about it when I give talks around the world. But I it, it was an ignorance thing, I think, because when we're that young, we think we're invincible. There's no thought of illness or disability or anything, because I'm young, I'm healthy, like nothing's going to happen to me. And so it was a wake up call. I had to grow up a lot during that
Mm,
period. And, I remember being in the hospital. I'm trying to relearn how to walk, and my friends are out at like fraternity parties and, doing stuff like that. And it was just, I'm in the stroke recovery ward with like people over twice my age, and so sometimes 3 times my age. But
mm,
but mindset. So what I had to do when I felt like my life was out of control, which it was, I couldn't control my brain or what it was doing. So I tried to focus every day on what I could control.
mm,
And it could be as simple as, making a plan of the things I was going to get done that day, or taking control of other parts of my health, like making sure I was exercising and eating healthy. Or,
mm,
for me, I'm also a strong Christian. So it was praying and reading my Bible, stuff like that. Like those were things that I could grasp that were in my control, and in some way that habit of doing that every day helped ease the feeling of absolute chaos.
Yeah. What is it about religion specifically that makes it better, that makes things better? Is it a familiarity? Is it kind of an idea that there's a higher purpose? What specifically is about religion? I know that people go to religion, whether they're Christian or Muslim or uh, Buddhist or any other religion, it doesn't really matter. You hear a lot about stroke survivors who found God, who discovered their religion again or rediscovered it. I didn't particularly go down that path. For me, it, what stroke taught me was that it's random, because next to me was a guy who had the same thing that I experienced, but was more severely injured from it. And on the other side was another person who had a similar thing and was very slightly uh, injured by it. And I had to have brain surgery and all those things. So I kind of took the approach of uh, stroke's just random. But how did your religion or being able to have religion support you in your recovery?
Well, I think you talked about it, already touched on this point. It was that there is a higher power who is in complete control. And, this has all been pre-written, this has all been worked out. And he knows he's going to use this for my good and for his glory, and that he has it in control. Like, so again, that control factor, that it felt uncontrollable to me, but there was somebody who was in complete control that I could rely on and find comfort in. And that I don't agree with the randomized, because I believe everything is planned and everything happens, and I don't believe in coincidences. And it's not about, oh, if you're a good person or you're a bad person. It's just about, it's who you were created to be. And this was part of my story before I even knew it was.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And then is it kind of an adjustment period? It's like, I thought I was meant to be a 22-year-old at frat parties, doing all the college stuff, and then I was going to go down this next path, which was going to perhaps be a job in my field, and so. But now you've been thrust into this different version of life at 22. The frat party wasn't what it was meant to be. Your idea wasn't wrong until that point in time. It was right, for example. And now is it just about you learning that you need to adjust your mindset and your approach to what else is coming that you're not aware of?
Oh yeah. So I talk about it a lot, that we all have a plan for our lives. Growing up, you think, I thought I was going to be an accountant, and I mentioned I used to ride horses, and like I was going to have all these nice horses and a farm maybe, and I had this plan, and this completely derailed my plan. And I can't even ride horses now, but I can still love them. But I talk about accepting your new reality. I still to this day have no functional use of my left hand. So I joke that I'm living one-handed in a two-handed world, because there are so many things you need two hands to do. But I am so blessed. I mean, I live a great life. I graduated from college. I work full time. I'm married. I'm hoping to start a family. I don't let it hold me back. I've accepted, one of the hardest parts of my recovery was accepting that this was my new plan, that this was my new reality. And I think we have to do that, because if you don't, then you're just going to be constantly disappointed and let down. Then you're going to be depressed. And we just have to accept that this is it. So what am I going to do with it? And am I going to be depressed, or am I going to make the best of it? And I talk about in my book, as well as kind of an analogy, is to adapt, improvise, and overcome. So you have your plan, and I equate it to when you're driving to work. You have the routes you take every day. You know it by heart. You could do it with your eyes closed. I do not recommend that, but you could do it. And you know exactly what turns to make, and you know what traffic's going to be like usually. And then there's road construction, and they close one of the roads on your route. And at first you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Like, I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't planning on this. And you're freaking out because you're going to be late for work. This has just like ruined your whole day. And so, but you take the detour route they usually have outlines, and you take that, you still get there. You might be a couple minutes late, but so you adapt by taking this new route that might not have been in your plan, but you have no other choice. So you're adapting to it. Then you might have, it might be a little bit of a longer route. So you have to improvise in your life. You have to maybe get up a little earlier, or have an extra cup of coffee so you can leave the house early and get to work on time. And so you're doing this for months and months and months. And if anybody lives in southwestern Pennsylvania like I do, it can take years, it seems, for roads to be opened back up. But you improvise, and then it comes to the point that you get so used to your new route and your new routine that you have overcome that, because now you can do that in your sleep. And you, again, I don't recommend, and you're used to it, and you're adapted, and you've improvised. So then you overcame the situation, and then your old road opens back up, and you have to make that decision. Do I even want to, maybe this route is prettier, or I get to drive by a coffee shop on the way to work now, so I can grab a coffee on my way to work. So it might end up being better. We don't know. It's just that at first, that initial reaction is always letdown and disappointment and frustration, but we don't know what this new route is going to do. It might end up being more beautiful.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
So basically what you're saying is that it's a time for adjustment and just seeing what's possible in this new approach, this new route, this new way of life. It's not necessarily worse, it's just different. And we just have to come to terms with understanding that we are the ones that have to make the change to adapt and overcome the new challenges or the new obstacles that are in front of us. And I completely agree with that. That's exactly what I did. And isn't it great? I mean, if religion can get you to that, I think it's amazing. That's fantastic. And it's not that I'm completely not religious. We've grown up in a religious household. And I suppose I may have drawn on my upbringing to kind of start to guide my path forward for my recovery. And then I was a little bit older than you, so at 37 I was able to bring in other life experiences and other lessons learnt from elsewhere, so that I can really make a solid new trajectory that I could follow, that I could be comfortable with. And then I did a lot of checking back with other people about how I was going, what I was doing, what can I change. I went and got re-educated in areas of, mindset, coaching, emotional intelligence, doing things that I loved, and stopped doing things that I didn't like. And I haven't let it stop me either, but I can see how it might stop some people. Did you come across any other stroke survivors in the time that you were in your early stages of recovery? Because at 22, I imagine there would not have been many. And therefore, did you have many examples of people at a similar age to you that you were able to draw on?
Yes, so I did meet several people. I mean, again, not maybe the similar age, but I, made friends with people. I'm just a people person. I love to talk to people. And, in my like recovery, like in the rehab centers, when I was like learning how to walk again, I'm spending a lot of time day in and day out with these people. So we end up talking, we did feed off of each other on just, how to cope with this new normal, and I think life is really a series of that. Like, it might not be to this severity, but it really is. You maybe even your job, for example, like, you dream of having this dream job and you're making all this money, you're CEO or something, and it's like, okay, my job is not that. I am not a CEO, but I am content with where I am, because that is where I'm supposed to be right now. But people, especially in recovery, I think having that support system to talk, I have a great family that surrounded me. And actually, my parents write a couple paragraphs at the end of each chapter in my book, because they wanted to give their perspective as a caregiver. Because it's not just the patient or the victim, the whole family goes through it. And it just adds a unique perspective to help families get through trials and tribulations. But I had them, which obviously they were a great support. However, they had never gone through something like I had went through. So when I would get frustrated with my disability or not being able to do things I used to be able to do, they couldn't fully understand. They would try to understand, but that they don't. And you want to talk to somebody who like actually understands this. So I did, and through Angioma Alliance, which is a nonprofit for people with cavernous angioma, they're international now. I've connected with so many people through there. I actually just got off the phone with somebody today who's about to have brain surgery, who is around my age, and she wanted to talk to somebody just about my experience. So having that is key.
That's amazing. That's exactly what I needed. So I came across somebody who had uh, I'm pretty sure they had a aneurysm rupture in the back of their neck when they were in their 30s and early 30s. And the guy was driving a truck at the time and had the episode in the back of his neck, drove into a pole, smashed the car, and the police attended and the ambulance attended, and they all thought that he had taken drugs and as a result smashed the car. And it was a work truck, so it had the phone number of the business on the side, and it was his dad's business. And they rang his dad and they said to him, listen, your son's been involved in an accident, what drugs has he been on? And Andrew hadn't never been on drugs, and his dad said he's not on drugs, he was just at the factory now, he just left now. What's happened? They eventually got to the uh, bottom of it, and they found that he had this bleed in the back of his head, and they got him to surgery. They managed to keep him alive, and he survived. And he went through a whole bunch of rehabilitation, and I'm pretty sure it was many years later he was back on his feet. Now, I didn't know the guy yet. And him and I intersected when I met his sister and explained to her what I'd been going through, and that a week from the day that I met her, I was going to be going into surgery. And then she just said to me, wow, my brother has had a similar experience, and he was in surgery and he's doing really well now. And I had never met anybody who had a stroke and had surgery. And I said to her, I need to meet him. Can you please put us in touch? And he lived near me. So sure enough, she put me in touch with him, and I met Andrew and went through this conversation. And after meeting him, it was like, whatever happens in surgery, things are going to turn out fine. No matter what I wake up with that I have to overcome, it's going to be fine. Like, it's doable. Brain surgery is a doable thing for people. And I met Andrew in 2014, in November of 2014. We're still great friends now. And we have a lot in common, obviously. And he understands me completely, and I him. And it's just a really positive thing that happened to have this conversation with somebody who had been through what I'd been through, all the hard times, and then all the recovery, and then had gone back to life. And I think for Andrew, it had been less than 10 years, but I saw the full spectrum of the stroke, then the really serious part of the surgery, and then life after stroke and the recovery. And luckily for Andrew, he didn't end up with any deficits on his left or right side. But he had to overcome a lot to get back to a full life. And his perspective on how much work he needs to do these days, and how much stress he needs to put himself through, and whether he does things that he hates or loves. And one of the most hardest persons to get in touch with and catch up with for a coffee is Andrew, because of course what he's doing is he's making sure that he's spending time with his wife, his children, being around as a dad. He doesn't work on Saturdays if you can avoid it, with a passion. Of course, he doesn't work on Sundays, and he goes out of his way to just be a family man and a dad. And as a result, I miss out on catching up with him. Now, not that I miss out and I'm concerned or it's a problem for us. We speak over the phone a lot, but that's kind of, he's brought it down to all these basics of life, all these, let's do the bare minimum and let's focus on being present, alive, hanging out with the people we love, supporting them, teaching them. His dad, who's in his 80s, still works at the business, and he spends heaps of quality time with his dad. They go away for a minimum of 6 weeks every summer. So he's really done the whole thing. He's still leading by example. For me, he's a younger guy than me, but he's still leading by example. And he has led me through this path in such amazing ways. And it's that thing, the gift that you gave to somebody by just talking to them. I think that's one of the best things you can give, is show the person the other side. I love that you did that. And what a relief it would be for that person going into surgery, knowing there's one less thing that they have to worry about.
Well, and I think a story that jumped out while you were talking about Andrew was so before my brain surgery, I got not much notice. I only had a couple days because after the 5th hemorrhage was so big, I was in the ICU, like fighting for my life. And they were like, we have to do this in like 2 days. So I really didn't have much time to like sit and like worry, oh my gosh, I'm about to have brain surgery. But we were talking about mindset earlier, and I strongly believe that the mind and body are connected. And I always tell people to set your mind for success before any big trial. Just like, and I think what Andrew did for you is he let you see that there is life on the other side of this, and you're going to be okay. Like when he said, you're going to be okay no matter what happens in surgery. So you went into that surgery feeling more confident. You went in saying, I'm going to be okay. And that plays a huge role, because so before my surgery, I decided, my surgery was a year before my sister's wedding. And I was in her wedding, well, supposed to be in her wedding. I was hoping to still be in her wedding, but the neurosurgeon came into my room to give me the lowdown of the risks. And, you might not be able to walk ever again. You might, not survive the surgery. You might be a vegetable, we don't know what's going to happen. You might be in a coma for a while. The odds were against me in a lot of areas, but I had this sense, and I kept telling myself that, and I kept picturing myself at her wedding in a year from then dancing. And I don't know why, but that's just what was in my head. And I kept like resonating with that, because it was giving me like confidence to go into this, and that I was going to be okay. And I went into that surgery. I came out, I was in recovery, and I'm hooked up to all the machines in the hospital, I swear. And my family is surrounding my bed, and I'm slowly waking up for anesthesia, and they're sobbing. My sister is sobbing at the foot of my bed. And I remember like waking up, I'm groggy, but I looked at her and I said, "Oh, quit your crying. I will be dancing at your wedding." And sure enough, I was. And so I just want people to know that, set your mindset on that success, like set it and know that you're going to achieve it. And then the rest will follow suit.
So, question that is a hypothetical. What if you weren't dancing at the wedding? You were at the wedding, but what if you didn't get the opportunity to dance because your recovery hadn't come that far yet? What then?
It would have just been another change in plan. Like I said, life is a series of those. Yes, I would have been disappointed, but if anything, I think it would have motivated me more to keep moving, because I was there, which was a huge miracle in itself.
Mm.
And what else is on the horizon, and what other possibilities are out there? And I worked hard every day in my recovery. I would, once I got home from the hospital from inpatient rehab, I every day said it, I was going to do a little bit each day towards my recovery. And that way, there's a chance in a couple of years from now, I'm still in a wheelchair and I'm not walking, and all this hard work would have been wasted. But I knew that I'd rather find out that way than not try it all and then wonder what if, looking back. And so it did take me a year to learn, to be able to walk without a cane. And then I did have like an AFO, like a brace I wore on my leg to help. And I had that for another year or two. And then now, I walk completely unassisted. So
You sound like a really positive, upbeat kind of person, glass half full, all that type of stuff. But there would have been real tough times and dark times. Was there? And did you take them badly? Did you have to go through the bad mental states and all that kind of stuff? How was that lead up to this other side of you, which we're all seeing now? We're seeing the positive, upbeat, reframing everything. I imagine it wasn't always like that.
it was not, and it still isn't. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, and I still have my days. And there were, during before my surgery, when I was having the bleeds and I didn't know what was going to happen, there was a time I contemplated suicide. I was in a really dark place. I was questioning my faith. I was questioning everything I had ever believed in. And I talk that, we're human. So these are natural emotions. And I think everybody needs to allow themselves to feel those, but, we can't stay there. So what I do now is I still have days, like I said earlier, I still don't have functional use of my left hand. So every day is a struggle. There are things multiple times in my day that remind me of my disability and things I can't do, but that's okay. And I have my moments, where I get down and I think like this isn't fair and I'm frustrated. And, I see other people who have two functioning hands and I'm like, I miss that, or I wish I could do that. And I allow myself those moments, but I don't stay there long. Because then I feel like that becomes a habit. I feel like happiness is a choice. And so every day I try and choose to be happy and grateful. And I think what I went through has changed my perspective. Like Andrew, I see life in a different light now. It's more precious. It's, now I know I'm not invincible. So I know that, life is short and it could change at any given moment and without warning. So I appreciate the little stuff, and I try to live each day like it's my last, because it might be, I have no idea. But no, I think it definitely is not all sunshine and rainbows, and it can be really hard. and that's normal. And I think people need an outlet for that. So whether it's journaling or venting to a friend, so I always recommend healthy outlets, not like drugs or alcohol, definitely not, but because that's just going to cause more problems in your life. But you have to find what works for you because everybody is different. For me, it's praying, it's worshiping, it's taking my crazy dog on a walk and just having quiet time. That to me is therapeutic.
Your dog wouldn't appreciate you revealing that it's crazy on the
Oh,
podcast, would it?
yeah, no, I think he knows, because he's really, really cute and he knows that he's cute, so he can get away with some stuff that other dogs would not. But he
Uh-huh.
did just look at me. So he is laying on the couch right now, but there is a high possibility during our time talking, he will start barking at something. So I'm just warning
Mhm.
you guys.
Okay. All right. Well, we can allow for that. No problem. So you can be happy as a mindset. You can choose happiness, but you can have a shitty day and you can feel bad. And it sounds like as long as the negative times that you allow to come up are fleeting, as in they're there, they reveal themselves, they let you know, and then you just kind of let it ease and pass and go away, and then come back in another form when it wants to later, if it wants to, etc. And I do that. I often sometimes think back, and because it's my 10 years this week, I'm constantly trying to go back to remembering what it was like for me before stroke. And it wasn't that much different, but things felt different. The body was different, supposedly perfect, or normal, or whatever it was. And it's never really been like that for 10 years. So now I do have also what you say, this constant reminder. Not that I remember my left side in a way that, oh yeah, oh yeah, I had a stroke. It's not that I remember the stroke. It's what I experienced that it's doing to me on that day, and it's like, oh yeah, you have to rest because your left side is tired now. So it's kind of more a reminder like that. It's telling me things that I need to be aware of, that I need to take action on, or I need to stop doing. And sometimes when I want to keep going, it's when I get frustrated and go, ah, crap, I wish I could keep going now, instead of not being able to keep going. Uh, I notice it when I'm being physically active and I'm tired. So when I'm physically active, but the tiredness hasn't kicked in yet, it's like it never existed. Like it's like I haven't got those deficits. But then later, as that physical activity tires me out, then it's like, okay, you're tired now. Pay attention. Stop. So that's kind of my daily reminder. It's a reminder of what I have to avoid doing or stop doing, rather than, by the way, remember when you were different 10 years ago. Does that relate? Do you relate to that?
Oh yes. I mean, I don't anymore. I used to earlier on, like remember what it was like using my left hand, and now not so much. I was a part of a clinical trial over this past summer for spinal cord stimulation, and I was the first person in the world to get it. But they're testing it. They've been using spinal cord stimulation for people with chronic pain for years, but they're now trying it on people who've had strokes and have arm and hand weakness or deficits. So I had great success. I actually just got my permanent one. I had my surgery back in November. And when I have it on, it does give me like probably 10% improvement in function, which doesn't sound like much to some people, but to me, that's like a lot. And it's never, but like I've accepted the fact that I'm never going to be what I was before, like my left arm, like it's just not. And but back to your question about, I get, the neuro fatigue still, and I get, my body tells me, times like you said, it's not so much as a reminder, but an alert to
Mm,
like, you need to, you need to take it easy, and it can be frustrating at times because sometimes it happens at like not the most greatest moments, and you're like on vacation or you're like out with your friends and it's like, okay, this isn't the time. And but our bodies, they are on their own clocks, and we have to listen to them. And I'd say my biggest thing though is throughout my day the reminders of what like I can't do. And I always again try to reshape my focus to what I can do. Like I am, with the amount of brain hemorrhages I had, and especially the last one, how severe it was, I am so lucky to be able to be doing what I do. Like the fact I can walk, the fact I can talk, I wasn't cognitively affected. I'm able to drive, I'm able to work full time. Like I really, I try to reshape that when I'm getting down on what my left hand isn't doing as to what the rest of my body can do that it, medically speaking, probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about your husband.
So my husband, he actually has a disability himself. He is hard of hearing. It's actually kind of how we met and connected. Was we were just talking about disabilities and living in a world of people who can be kind of ignorant sometimes. And he works in IT, I work in HR, I think I mentioned that already. And he is literally a godsend. I mean, I was married once before, early on in my recovery, and it turned out to be a toxic relationship, unfortunately. And so we divorced, and I met my now husband, who has been like the answer to all my prayers. And he's an amazing guy. He's funny. And I told you about the crazy dog. But we hope to start a family sometime soon, within the next year, hopefully. And yes, I do freak out about my disability and how I'm going to be able to do that. And I'm sure, my neuro fatigue, I've thought like, okay, how am I going to function on like 2 hours of sleep? But I just know I'm going to figure it out. Like I talked about earlier, sometimes you just got to say, I have no other choice. Like you got to figure this out.
There's lots of first-time mums and dads who have had children after the stroke or just before the stroke. And yeah, people adapt, right? We're adapting amazingly different ways all the time to get through whatever we have to get through. And it might be a little bit harder for some people, but in the end, you find your own way. Like there's no right way to raise a family, there's no correct path. Everyone does it their own way. So you'll find your own way and you'll be able to manage it really well with one hand. There's so many people on the planet that are doing that, especially stroke survivors. I'm sure you'll be able to reach out and find somebody to share stories. I know I've interviewed a few people that have been through stroke just after childbirth and just before childbirth. So I think you'll be fine. You'll work it out. What the reason I asked about your husband, amongst other things, was to get an understanding of what it's like dating, because a lot of people who go through what you've been through and who have obvious disabilities or deficits struggle with the mindset about how can somebody date me? I'm not perfect, or I'm not right, or this, why would somebody want to date me? Did you have those types of thoughts going through your mind, and how did you overcome them if you did?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I got divorced from my first marriage, I was disabled, and that was my first thought, was who's going to accept me for who I am. And I need a little extra help around the house sometimes, like opening jars, which I think a lot of women do.
Even
But
I
some
do.
don't.
Let's be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, and
but
the jar
I
won't open sometimes. Like,
I
just
know.
doesn't want to open.
I know. I swear they do that. And then he comes and it's like real easy. And I say, well, I loosened it for you.
Yes,
So,
yes.
but it is a tricky thing to do. But that was my first thought. And my encouragement to those people wondering that is, I eventually had to just tell myself, you know what? There is not one perfect person out there on this planet right now. And we all have our things. And, I got lucky to meet my husband, who has also a physical disability. So he doesn't even see my disability. Like, I'll say I have a disability and he's like, no, you don't. And, when you find the right person, they don't see that stuff.
Yeah.
And they see you for you, what's inside. And I can be even a little crazy sometimes, and he loves that. So you just gotta, nobody is perfect. And it's so special to find that person that sees you for what's inside and sees your heart and your soul. And it's just, don't be afraid, because there is somebody out there that is going to think you're the most perfect person on this planet.
Yeah. Is it about self-love? Is it about accepting yourself totally? I know that I've come to accept the way I look, or how I am, or how I behave. Not that I behave like a crazy or idiotic person or anything like that. I'm not rude or obnoxious or anything. But just my personality, I know, rubs some people up the wrong way. And it's just because I'm I'm outgoing, and I'm outspoken, and I'm an extrovert. So is it about self-love? Because the more that I accept me, the more I seem it seems to be that other people just sort of accept me or don't. And if they don't take it the wrong way. They just go, oh, I couldn't hang out with Bill. He's too full on, or he's too in my face, or he's too outspoken, or he wants to know too many answers to too many questions. Does that resonate with you? Is that how you moved from being somebody who was concerned about whether people would love them to then becoming somebody who was like, yeah, sure, I'll find somebody. It's a matter of time.
It's 100% self-love. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head, that I had to, love myself for me, accept who I am. And I just said, this is me. Like, I can't change my disability. Unfortunately, if I could snap my fingers, I would, but I can't. And I'm just going out there, and somebody's either going to take it or leave it. And you know what? That's okay. Like, if they want to leave it, because this is me and I can't change it, and this is who I am. And I think people wholeheartedly have to love themselves before they're able to allow others to love them, and to have that identity and to be your authentic self. I think is really important before going out and dating.
This is going to be an interesting question for you then. You said you would, if you could snap your fingers, you would change it so that you don't have your disability anymore. But the question is, would you really do that? Would you really snap your fingers and change it and go back to the non supposedly disabled person?
That's a great question. I really? No, I wouldn't, because I don't want to take away what I went through. Because it has shaped me to who I am today, and I'm really proud of that person. I am so proud of myself. Like, I really am. I mean, I have a long way to go in a lot of areas, but that overcoming what I overcame is one of the things I'm proud about. And now, would I make it maybe a little less disabled, but not fully? Yes. But like, to still have that reminder that, it was real and what I went through was really tough. But no, that's a great question. And it's funny, my husband is the same way with his hearing. He lost his hearing like as a baby, we think. He's had it all he can remember, and he wears hearing aids. But he still, has a lot of trouble, and it's hard for him. Every day is hard in certain situations. But I've asked that question, like, if you could snap your fingers, and he's like, no, I wouldn't like change it. And this is just, who I am. And he jokes that he likes sleep too much. He likes to be able to take his hearing aids out at night and he doesn't have to hear anything. He just sleeps like a baby. So But no, that's a great question, because like I am like, this isn't define me, but what I went through is just something, such a part of who I am, and my personality, my strength, I don't think I would ever want to erase that.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, if it wasn't, well, let's not think about all the other possibilities of what things might have happened between the age of 22 for you and now. But say you hadn't had the stroke, you wouldn't have had that deep understanding of of the dark times, the good times, how to allow the dark times to present themselves and how to overcome them and what lesson you need to learn from them and all that kind of stuff. That all those lessons would have been yours to still learn at 32. And it's like, oh wow, like I picked up a lot of these lessons when I was 22, when most of the time at 22 we are ignorant of the majority of what life is about, and we think that the worst things that have happened to us, happened to us when we were at high school or whatever, but we don't understand about what else is to come in life. I was a dad at 21. So at 21, I learned all the lessons that you have to about being frugal, about working a little harder, tightening your belt, about the children, about keeping the, the food on the table. I had to learn that early, and it's kind of saved me from learning it in my 30s or 40s or whatever it was that a lot of other people do. And for me, what that taught me was that uh, it's better to learn the hard lessons early so that you have them, the wisdom of them later on in life when you're really gonna need the wisdom, like when you have a damn stroke, and you need to draw on some previous life experiences to help you get through the challenges of a stroke and overcome the stroke. So um, I I love throwing that question out there, but would you really? Because I've asked so many people that question, and very few of them actually say 110%. Yeah, I would get rid of it totally, and I wouldn't want to uh, have the experience, because most people after a even after a few years or even months, but definitely after a decade, can look back and go, actually, it shaped me. I've grown. I've learned a lesson. I've overcome. I now know how to guide and advise other people that are going through something similar. Um, so uh, I love that that question made you think, and hopefully it's making people listening and watching think as well about that, about what they can take out of it. And sure, if we can wind down or dial down the disability part and the tough days and make them a bit less tough, yeah, I reckon I would do that too. But uh, most of what I've learned has been really, really useful. And even learning how to deal with that constant reminder of, oh, your left side doesn't do what it used to, or does it differently. Even learning how to deal with that and overcome that, that's a great thing to deal with and overcome. That's change that's been thrust upon me that I've got to manage, because I didn't choose it. So I've got to learn how to just get on with it and still do my podcast and still do all the things that I want to do, regardless, and not let it get in my way. So I imagine that those 10 years of lessons that you've learned have made for a very rich book. You've referred to it a couple of times, and I definitely want to ask you about the book. It's called Headstrong, Through Life, Love, and Brain Surgery. How did it come about? How did you get to the point where you decided you're going to write a book? It's a very common theme in the stroke survivor community, which I love.
Yeah, I think it was within the first year after my stroke, my parents and I were talking, and just we kind of, it was, I don't want to say it was a joke, but it was like a very like light kind of statement. Oh, we should write a book. And but I really obviously didn't have the capacity to do it at that time. I was so focused on my recovery, and I don't think mentally I could have handled the stress of writing a book. So it went on, and every year we would kind of just say it in the background, maybe at a family dinner or something. And then I met a gentleman who's in Australia who helps people write books, and
Who is it?
Andrew Jobling.
Okay.
He's written like 8 or 9 books now by himself. He's a best-selling author. He helps people write books. He's a speaker, great guy. And we got connected through a mutual connection. And I was like, this is my sign that, I just need to do this, because I learned so much about mindset, about overcoming challenges, that I wanted to help other people, because I mean, the truth is we all go through challenges. It's, life sucks sometimes, but I talk about that. My real motto is, we can't control what happens to us, but what we can control is how we react to those situations. And I just wanted to get that out there. And then I started writing. I mentioned earlier that my parents co-authored. They have a couple paragraphs at the end of each chapter giving their perspective. And I talk about not just my stroke. It's really a true memoir. I talk about the beginning of my life, I went through a severe depression in middle school. I even went through some self-mutilation. I talk about some relationships I had that I really feel shaped me as a person early on. I mentioned my divorce. I talk about that. And obviously the bulk of it is my strokes and the brain surgery, and then my recovery from that. And I just wanted to help people, and that's where it was birthed out of.
Yeah, lovely place for it to come from. So Andrew Jobling is actually probably well known in Australia, not by me, but he was a team member of a football club in Victoria, which is football mad in the state of Victoria, and so is Australia, really. The St Kilda Football Club, and he's 57 years old now, so there'd be plenty of people that know of him. And he shifted from a football career to this interesting career where he helps people with all sorts of things. He says, empowering you to live a life of joyful longevity. He is he is an author who has published 8 books and is on a mission to inspire people to live a purposeful life of joyful longevity. He's also been a cafe owner, a public speaker. Wow, what a guy.
Yeah, he's a busy guy, but he is the most down-to-earth person. So sweet. He's my mentor. I still talk to him even though my book is published. I did start writing my second book now, and I talk to him frequently, and he's part of my family, really. And he did come over to the States to visit right before COVID hit, and we got to spend a week with him here. And just all around great guy. Anybody who's looking for a mentor in any way in their life, he's the person I would recommend.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So was it a long time? Did it take a long time to get the book complete and published? So I'm talking about the writing and the creative part of the book.
The writing took probably a year and a half. I made it, and something Andrew had taught me was do a little bit each day. And some days that was 2 words, some days that was 1,000 words. It really varied, based on where I was at. But I also kept like a notepad with me anywhere I went, because I would be at work, or I don't know, in a car, and something like an idea would hit me and I would have to jot it down so I didn't forget. But it took some time, but it wasn't as long as I thought. I thought it working full time that it was going to take forever, but doing it a little bit each day really helped. I got it done in about a year and a half, and then it took me about a half a year to get a publisher. I did do a traditional publishing, so I did find a publisher. And that took some time, and that was hard because, I sent my manuscript to a lot of different publishers, and I got a lot of no's at first. And, it was kind of deflating, and you get worried, like, okay, well, maybe, maybe this isn't going to get published. And I just put all this work into it. And then, the right one comes along, and it just worked out beautifully. So,
Fantastic. Well, it just goes to show you it's about really putting your mind to something and just going for it, and then finding solutions as the problems come up, and just giving yourself another way to get to a successful outcome. I mean, if you haven't got in mind only one way to succeed, then you're most likely going to succeed. Because that's, I think, what lets me down is if I choose that I've got one only way to succeed, then there's more chances that I'll fail at succeeding. But if I've got many ways to succeed, then that's fine as well. Then if one doesn't work out, another one will. Self-publishing is one of those ways to succeed in a book writing world where a publisher doesn't take up the book. Yeah, it's a slightly different challenge, and it's a bit longer, and it's harder perhaps, and it's more expensive. I don't know what. But in the end, you can still publish your book if that's the most important thing to you, if you need to get it done. I love that. And it's interesting that you found, of all people, from all around the world, you found somebody so far away in the other side of the planet in Australia. That's strange and bizarre when you would have thought there was plenty of people to support you just near where you are.
yes, it was definitely, nothing I would have expected. And like I said, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe God sent him to me, and he tells everybody. And I want all your listeners to know that there is a book inside everyone. I mean, even if you haven't had a stroke, or, it was your family member, there's always a story. And, he helps all types of people. It's amazing. And I had no idea where to start. I think that was what held me back for so many years, was I didn't know where to. I like to write. Like, people tell me I'm good at writing emails, but I don't sit and write for fun, but I've always liked writing, like when I was in college. But I never dreamed of being an author. It's not something I grew up saying, oh, I'm going to be an author. But it was something that came from what I went through. Again, why I would not erase it, because then I wouldn't be sitting here as an author. But everybody has a story, and sometimes you have a story that somebody needs to hear.
Yeah, I love that. If any of the aspiring authors out there don't know where to start by writing a lovely email to somebody and practice your emails. Just make them the most fantastic emails that
Yeah.
ever existed. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Heather. I really appreciate it. We had a lovely chat. It was great to get to know you. I hope the book does really well. I'll have links to your book and to your website and to your Instagram for people who want to reach out or connect or find the book. They'll be able to do that. But if people are listening and they haven't got a chance to check out the show notes, where is the best place for them to find you and your book?
Well, my website is heatherheadstrong.com. And there is a link to my book on there. There's a contact form. It'll get straight to my inbox, so you can practice your really good email. And I'd love to hear from anybody. My book is on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. There's an audio version as well, if someone prefers to listen rather than read. If somebody wants to reach out to me and get a signed copy of my book, I'd be happy to do that as well. So reach out. And Bill, I thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And all the best with all your future projects.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. Please like, share, give the episode a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, comment, leave some kind of an interaction with the podcast. It'll help it rank better and therefore be found easier by stroke survivors from all around the world. And hopefully that'll make them have a slightly better stroke recovery than if they didn't find the podcast. Also, I love hearing from people. So if you leave a comment, I will respond I really like getting feedback from people. Tell me what the podcast meant to you, what the particular episode was that made a difference for you. Anything that you like, just feel free to reach out and let me know. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to bringing you the next episode soon.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamas. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.